A surprising U-turn from President Trump on Russian President Vladimir Putin. After appeasing Putin for nearly a decade, this week saw Trump pivot. Trump has accused Putin of stringing him along and continuing some of Moscow's biggest bomb attacks on Ukraine, but Trump did not stop there. Trump has announced an arms deal in favor of Ukraine that will see billions of dollars of military equipment that will be purchased by NATO and sent to Ukraine for use on the battlefield. Trump has given Putin 50 days to strike a peace deal or face economic sanctions. Remember, not long ago, Trump called Putin a genius while blaming Ukraine for the war. Now Trump says he's disappointed with the Russian leader.
How did you tell Putin this was coming?
My conversations with him are always very pleasant. I say, isn't that a very lovely conversation? And then the missiles go off that night. I go home, I tell the First Lady, I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, oh, really? Another city was just hit. So it's like, look, he's, I don't want to say he's an assassin, but he's a tough guy.
For more, we're now joined by former US Ambassador to NATO, Douglas Lute, for an exclusive interview. Ambassador Lute, thank you very much for your time here. A stunning pivot by Trump. Some say Trump felt perhaps slighted, he's given the Russian leader plenty of chances to stop the war, but Putin keeps dropping those bombs. What do you think happened with Trump's change of heart?
Well, it is in fact a pivot, because for the first 6 months of this Trump administration, there's been no pressure, no leverage asserted on the Russian side of the war in Ukraine. And so for the first time, the president is promising renewed arms shipments to Ukraine, American weapons to Ukraine. That's very helpful. And then, as you've reported, in the next 50 days, without a ceasefire in place, to which the US and Ukraine have already agreed. Without a ceasefire in place, the president promised economic sanctions to include sanctions on those who import Russian oil. So this is very, very important leverage. Why is this happening? I think, first of all, Trump really legitimately wants to stop the fighting in Ukraine. So I give him credit for that. I think, however, beyond that, there's another perhaps psychological explanation, and that is President Trump does not wish to be played. He does not wish to be diminished in any way. He does not wish to be perceived as weak. And after 6 months of trying with no results, I think he fears that, in fact, he might be perceived as weak, especially among his political base here in the United States.
Ambassador Luke, like we've been talking about, Trump has given Russia a 50-day ultimatum, stop the war, face those secondary sanctions, basically tariffs on any country that buy Russian exports, such as China and India, which is mainly oil. Now, really, isn't that tricky, though, a tricky proposition for Trump himself, given the possible impact on crude prices that could spike and, affecting inflation in the US, something that Trump really doesn't want to see?
Yes, in fact, a secondary effect of secondary sanctions could well be a spike in oil prices, and that could affect the American inflation rate. So, yes, you're right. Now, if Trump and his advisors are wise, I believe they'll use this next 50 days while giving Russia a chance to move towards a ceasefire. They'll use these 50 days to mitigate the risk of inflation. And they can do that by negotiating and preparing to increase oil flows from other producers, most prominently those in the Gulf and even American producers themselves. So this next 50 days could be useful as a way to mitigate the risk of inflation.
Very, very quickly, Ambassador Lute, how much will this supply of arms really help Ukraine protect its territory in the war?
Well, it depends a lot on the details. So which arms, in what quantity, and on what timeline? Are these only defensive systems, such as the U.S. Patriot anti-ballistic missile air defense system, or do they include offensive systems, which would allow, without geographic restriction, allow Ukraine to strike the launch sites from which the air attacks originate? And these would be attacks inside Russia itself. So a lot depends on which systems and which restrictions might be placed on those systems.
Right, Ambassador Douglas Lute, thank you so much for your time here on Washington.
Pleasure.